I found out I was doing this a few days ago, but I did take down some questions, and mine was actually touching on ethics. And I think the things that we're talking about, the world doesn't believe is as close as we that are doing the work believes is possible, or we probably wouldn't do it. We may be wrong, and that's fine, but what if we're right? And so that's what you're doing, and you must have thought about it deeply. How would you scale it up? I don't think most people in the room believe that we can ship a consumer electronics device in just a few years that will allow us to communicate with human thought. And I think there are ethical considerations. That's why I'm talking about it. But what can we do more broadly? You've thought about this for many years.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges here is that preventative medicine in general is harder to get approval for than fixing something that's staring us in the face, life and death threat. And the same thing's true for preventing a harm. They say, oh, they're hyping it. You know, they're getting us anxious about something that will never materialize. And that may be that it never materializes, but that risk, a small risk of talking about something that doesn't materialize is very small compared to the risk of having something big that creeps up on us at the last minute. So I think that's the reason that at least everybody on this stage is motivated to talk about things as far in advance as we can. It's hard to be far in advance because we are on an exponential now, and some of these exponentials are faster than Moore's law, meaning, fivefold per year, that sort of thing. But that just increases the urgency of talking about it and engaging many different voices in society as early as possible.
What do you think?
I think that's exactly it, especially as technology becomes progressively more powerful. We run into questions of how should we decide whether, when, and how to use it. And again, with some of these technologies, we've just never had to deal with questions on that scale before, just because the technology wasn't that powerful before. But it's an open question because one of George's favorite remarks is that doing nothing is also a choice. And we know cognitively that we're biased towards the status quo.
Right.
So we're not very good at recognizing that in some cases, we might need to do something even though our inclinations are the reverse. George, what do you think of that?
Yeah, I think that the brain is a perfectly good example. Sometimes you don't know exactly what the problems might be, but by bringing up what you see as a shocking new capability gets people to start thinking about what the problems might be. And they may never materialize because you took action on them. It's like, maybe Y2K would have been a bigger deal if we hadn't done anything about it. And the funny thing is, nobody's going to be a hero for having averted something so thoroughly and so flawlessly that nobody even notices it. That's one of the challenges, but you have to do it anyway.
So just one more follow-up. I live in Marin County, California, where most people believe in astrology. I wish that wasn't true, but, and global warming, as I understand it, some people still, despite the data. And so given that as a backdrop, how do we have that discussion? The lack of belief in science in general.
Well, I think it's hard to have the discussion unless it impacts them. So if it's harmless, like nutritional supplements, which have a big lobby, it's impossible to legislate on it anymore because it's such a big industry, or astrology, then it's really hard to change their minds. Or if it's something that's so far off, like evolution, it's hard to change minds. But if it's impactful and it's here today, say the GM food that like to imply there's something hazardous about GM foods, or at least an unknown, they don't complain so much about GM insulin, right? Because diabetics depend on having their insulin made in bacteria rather than harvesting them for cadavers or pigs. So I think it's a matter of choosing our battlefields very carefully and making sure that they're confronted with people who are actually needy, Lyme disease victims that have been severely affected, malaria victims, and so on.
So, Kevin, how do we get you supported to eradicate Lyme disease? Better supported.
Well, right
That's
now,
awesome.
again, we're exploring the idea. So sadly, the mice that are around here that carry Lyme disease are not the mice that we commonly work with in the laboratory. Then it would be cake. So we got to work out transgenesis in those mice. We have to work out how to make them immune. And the idea is essentially partly to address some of those potential objections. So the mice have an immune system, and in that they will learn to recognize the proteins that the Lyme bacterium makes, or potentially even the tick saliva proteins. And if you get bitten by ticks enough, then you actually generate an immune reaction that can actually kill subsequent ticks. Not everyone does this, but thankfully most people don't get bitten by ticks that much. But we could take the mouse's native immune response, sequence it, because now we can do that, find out which antibodies are most protective, and encode them in the germline so that mice would be born producing those antibodies. So this is actually a technology that has received remarkably little attention that Johnson and Baltimore have been developing, called vectored immunoprophylaxis, that uses more what George is talking about, somatic gene therapy, to give people the ability to make antibodies that are already optimized for combating a particular pathogen. So in this case, we would just be doing that to the mice, making it heritable, and then potentially adding a gene drive to spread it through the population.
That's awesome. So we sit here at the 30th birthday party for the Media Lab, the fabulous Media Lab. Predictions, what are we going to be celebrating at the 50th birthday party for the Media Lab? What's going to have changed? What's going to be hot? What's going to have happened?
I think everything we've been talking about here will probably
It'd be nice if most of the things on that list
yeah.
were done by then, yeah. And as well as being able to control our own brains, but maybe not each other's directly.
Oh,
Or maybe that too.
we have we
guess
have
we're
to
already
go
doing
for
that.
I. That's Nicholas. Nicholas has a slide about the books being turned and then the books going into the brain, and might be a way.
We need to have more memory in there.
Honestly, just expanding human working memory even a little bit would be so enabling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Implants.
Yeah.
What about 100? What about at 100?
Oh, so, okay, I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I would say that I try not to worry about, say, the impact on more than 10 generations hence. By the way, I should say that gene drives really won't work on humans because it's a parents-to-offspring phenomenon, which means it takes a large number of generations to spread. Now, even if it weren't for the possibility that our children would decide to reverse any given gene drive that you might put into them, you'd also have to wait thousands of years to have an impact on humans just because our generation time is so long. So with that out there, I got to say that I don't worry too much about what's going to happen more than, say, 7 or so generations hence, because given the rate of technological enhancement, the odds that humans will be that much like us, I would say is pretty slim.
I think that's an awesome note to end on. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah. Well, if we're still alive, I hope we're not in zoos, that we're actually augmented ourselves, yeah.
Thank you, everybody.